Hey everyone. Today's NDE comes to us from a young woman, Jennifer Simmons. Jennifer tells how she is an addict in recovery, and during her NDE, she meets Jesus, leaves her body, experiences peace in the light, and returns to her body with no addictions. So this synopsis doesn't do this one justice. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee and enjoy the narration. If you like this video, hit that like, and consider subscribing. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. A young addict in recovery encounters Jesus, departs from her body, experiences peace in the light, and returns to her body with no addictions. On February 16, 2022, at 15:46, some elements of this story date back much further than my enlightening experience. I first experienced persistent anxiety and panic attacks when I was 14 years old. Absolutely terrifying, I constantly have a sense of impending doom. My sympathetic nervous system made the decision to activate permanently at this point. I began utilizing antidepressants and anxiety pills. Not to mention that my home life was utter chaos in many different ways. I had a bad back injury by the time I was 20 after falling after having an appendectomy. I used to be able to get any opiate or benzo I wanted and as many as I wanted from my corrupt doctor at the time, who was no longer allowed to practice medicine. My addiction began to take hold, and it had the astonishing power to obliterate the last vestiges of my sense of self. I found my current boyfriend a year after we first met. He got to see all the beautiful disasters that come with having an addict for a girlfriend who is always in fight or flight mode, and we love each other very much. My heart rate would typically be 130 BPM. I was awake from when I woke up until I went to bed. My subconscious wasn't sound at all. I was completely out of control in my dreams, and I would frequently awaken in a panic. I kept on acquiring fears and phobias over the course of the following, or final, 7 years of my life. Even though I tried my hardest to be level, which I obviously wasn't, Tim, my boyfriend, got to see me self-destruct. Important, my mother and I were the closest mothers and daughters could possibly be. She was very much in a parasitic, mutually beneficial relationship with me. She struggled with addiction all of my life, and when I was a teenager, we started using drugs together. If I said or even thought that she might die or wouldn't be there for me, I would experience terrible panic and fear. We had a suicide agreement since I was 13, but I think most of the time we wanted to kill each other more than ourselves. She would go out of her way to bring me the substances I was trying to avoid even though I tried to avoid drugs. She was aware that I wanted to change, but she didn't want to give up what she had. No matter how awful she was to me, I was unable to flee. Not so much physically, but in the mental hold she had developed over the years around my throat. In the nicest possible manner, my boyfriend would advise me to get the hell away from her. I tried several times, all to no avail. In February 2014, I was suffering from a severe case of depression and an exorbitant amount of anxiety, and one morning I woke up gasping for air and coughing up blood. I arrived at the hospital by myself, and as soon as they saw me, they hurried me into the ER. My left lung was found to have walking pneumonia, and I also had 2 pulmonary embolisms. My blood was 6 times thicker than it should be, according to the results of my D-dimer test. The doctors were only just able to control my pain due to my tolerance after being on painkillers for so long. At the time, I was taking 5 Norco 10/325s daily and 3 mg of Klonopin. My hospital stay lasted almost 2 weeks. They prescribed blood thinners to me and advised me to change my lifestyle. Which, at the time, I considered to be true. The changes I would start to make would hardly scratch the surface and not even come close to the origin of what really needed to happen, despite the fact that they told me I had avoided death. In January 2016, a heart attack and cardiomyopathy brought death to the door once more. Similar to the embolisms, I once woke up unable to breathe or even sit up for myself. My hands were incredibly swollen, and my lungs were filled with fluid. Driving myself to the hospital once more while experiencing an unsettling déjà vu. When I got there, they took me right back to the ER, ran some tests, and told me that if it didn't go away on its own, I had a 50% chance of needing a heart transplant. A week in the hospital. 3 different heart medications were prescribed to me by doctors. With the forthcoming superficial changes, I had to repeat what I had done the previous year. Only this time, both my anxiety and my opiate intake went even higher. In an effort to help my favorite drug fade away, I returned to church and started a strict AA program in October 2016. Even though it was very challenging, I had total faith. I've always been a fighter, but it's harder than it seems to fight with yourself all day. Given that both of my parents were opiate addicts who later switched to meth, addiction is a topic I am very knowledgeable about. I was unable to do much other than think about taking a pill as the obsession grew so strong. Now, My anxiety is at an all-time high. By December, my relationship with Tim and my mother had begun to rapidly deteriorate, and another dreary Christmas had passed. I broke up with my boyfriend in January 2017 while still attempting to lead an opiate-free lifestyle. I was in a state of disbelief and starting to look for drugs. Unbeknownst to me, my mother had a positive impression of a charming, young, well-groomed man she met at the bank. She gave him my number even though she has the worst ability to assess a person's character. I was horrified by what she had done, but I wasn't surprised. We started communicating and meeting by the end of January. I assumed that he was a decent enough person. Then came my turning point, the query that set me on the road to my demise and rebirth. Do you know where I might be able to find some Norcos? Without pausing, he retrieved a sizable prescription bottle filled with Norcos from the center console. I had emerged from my descent into hell, the major leagues. There aren't many things I can remember clearly between the months of February and June. The runaway train effect from Chernobyl had taken hold. Everyone in my immediate vicinity was waiting for the call to say that I had overdosed. I was unable to experience joy. There was nothing but suffering and an ongoing battle in my head. Complete mental and spiritual pain from head to toe. The only way to come close to a glimmer of hope that things might change was to continue going to church and praying. On June 1st, I lost control of my vehicle, flipping it onto its side in the middle of the street and colliding with a parked vehicle. To get me out, the firefighters had to cut the roof off. I was admitted to the hospital with a neck injury and left the next day for home. At this point, I find it increasingly difficult to describe what is happening to me and how I have no control over what is about to happen. On June 4th, Tim dropped by my house and warned me that I was going to pass away. I was aware of it. An addict will do almost anything to avoid the sickness of the opiate detox creeping up their spines when it comes to quitting drugs. I've done it and avoided it numerous times. But something was different. Like my NDE began right at this precise moment. It didn't matter that I was taking a lethal dosage of opiates and benzodiazepines, 15 Norco 10-325, 10 Percocet 10-325, 4 8mg strips of Suboxone, 6 mg of Klonopin, and 6 mg of Xanax daily, though. I was powerless to resist when Tim came to take me to detox. I had been the subject of some sort of psychic intervention, and whatever it was had totally disarmed me. Which is completely against who I am. Looking back, I recall not wanting to go to detox that day. I made an effort to envision the course that my life would take if I were to simply return home but failed to do so. I'm not sure if I would have perished in a car accident on the way home, but I did know that the only way to have any chance of living was to get to the hospital. I wasn't afraid of getting sick or of all the wonderful and terrible things that would happen when I first arrived at detox on the 6th. There are typically good intentions behind your reasoning when you consider significant, life-changing events in your life. I don't remember having any intentions, and I didn't either. It appeared as though my nearly 28-year life was about to come to an end. Once I was admitted, I had no hope for the future. In my mind, I had run out of room. There was nothing at all. I made the decision to put my trust in the staff, assuming they would consider how much medication I was taking. They failed too. They completely stopped giving me any opiates and reduced the amount of Klonopin I was taking each day to 3 mg, along with the antidepressant I had been taking for years. The fear and sickness began to set in on the second night of detox. My blood pressure was within normal limits, my temperature varied from 102 to 96.0 and back up to 102, and my heart rate was a steady 157 beats per minute. Although I had previously undergone opiate detox, nothing could have prepared me for the degree of intensity that was gradually taking hold. The third day, I woke up in a nightmare. I had never in my life imagined experiencing such severe physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual suffering. My muscles were spasming, and I was covered in a thick layer of cold sweat. I spent 5 days in bed. Of 3, I hardly remember any of them. I looked at the wall while turning onto my right side. I was certain I was going to pass away. There was no question in my mind, and the few times I managed to reach the phone to call Tim, I repeatedly emphasized this to him. I realized there was nothing I could do because I was confined inside the hospital. I kept staring at the wall while experiencing a new level of iciness and helplessness. I was ready to die. Then time stood still. Someone was coming toward my bed, but I'm not sure if I was visibly looking or if I had started to leave. He came to me as my messenger and my guide, and he looked physically similar to Jesus. He was approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall and had gorgeous light brown hair. When you looked at the white suit directly, the fabric had its own depth and life. I had never before given that color such significance in my life. It stood for innocence and security. He walked over to the foot of my bed wearing sandals. The remaining memories are then like still frame photographs. I suddenly found myself a foot away from him at eye level after leaving my body. I could interpret and understand what he was saying to me without words with every look he gave me. Such as telepathy, I was just air at this point and could see everything from every angle. He instructed me to turn around and look at myself in bed with his face. I could suddenly see myself without turning. I was impossibly pale and immovable. I was unable to detect my breathing. He gave me a look that said, "Your pain does not go unnoticed, there is this other place that exists without pain." When I turned to face him, I followed his gaze to the wall in front of me. On the wall was something that appeared to be one of those phony tunnel paintings used in cartoons. I kept looking, and the longer I looked, the deeper and more obvious this tunnel was. Inside the tunnel, the surface wasn't smooth. It had rings all over the inside and was a dark gray color. It had a glossy, almost wet rock appearance. The further I gazed, the further into eternity with a faint light it went, because I was no longer in my body. When my eyes or vision reached a certain point in the tunnel, everything went dark. A vast, dark nothingness. No sounds, feelings, or apprehensions. I had arrived in a location with light, not glaringly bright light, but a soft, comforting light. The time and space scales used on Earth did not apply in this realm. A straight line that resembled a horizon line was in the distance in front of me. It flickered constantly and was both white and black. There was an orb in the middle of this horizontal line. A ticking white ball of light. All of human knowledge, past and future, was contained there. It appeared to be completely still, like an optical illusion, because it was moving so quickly and was so alive. It faded into a light yellow and then a magnificent orange outside the brilliant ball of white. I had an endless view both above and below. I was in a state where I had simultaneously changed into everything and nothing. I'm just gassing around in one place. There was no reason for me to attempt to cross this realm. I simply was. On Earth, what people believe you need to be able to see without using my body or my eyes. It wasn't euphoric or painful here. I didn't feel threatened. I had grown accustomed to everything that was happening. Fear, rage, resentment, or self-punishment had no place in this environment. There was complete silence, but there were loud signals with no phonetic structure. A language that is unintelligible to humans or our physical bodies on Earth. I had arrived at a place of undeniable understanding and acceptance. I'm aware that I wasn't asked if I wanted to go back to my flesh, but something kept drawing me there. The next thing I recall is the nurse entering the room to perform the 4-hourly vitals check. How long I was gone is unknown. Possibly 4 minutes or 4 hours. I was still very ill for a few days after that and unable to comprehend what had happened. All I know is that I genuinely thought I was going to pass away. Knowing you are going to die is a very defining moment. On June 16, when I was discharged from the hospital, a new version of myself had appeared. Mentally, all traces of the fear and anxiety that had controlled my life for so long were gone. Like I'd never had it before. The addiction that had long followed me had also vanished. For me, passing away was a cleansing process. When I returned to my body, all of those crippling conditions had disappeared. I went to this other place where none of the things that had previously controlled me made sense. It was as if only the purest version of me was allowed to return. This does not imply that I was not shocked. Although almost everything had changed slightly, it was essentially the same. My body was responding to a variety of signals. My body went into fight or flight mode as I experienced a physical panic attack, but my higher brain was completely at ease. My body didn't start responding to my brain for a few months. I had to unplug everything electrical, especially the Wi-Fi, when I got home. Within my somatosensory nervous system, I could feel a buzzing. I stopped taking my antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications a week after leaving detox. Since I was 14 years old, this was the first time I hadn't been taking any medication. It's challenging to describe how my life and state of mind are right now. In this new life, only 5 months have passed. Without a doubt, I am certain that I would not be alive today if I hadn't had this experience. Tim, my boyfriend, is in awe of everything I am capable of and everything I beg of him for. The events in this alternate reality that have had the biggest effects on me take place suddenly. Similar to how I had always parted my hair on the left side. One day, I noticed that I was wearing my hair parted to the right. I astral travel while I'm asleep. My dreams and how my subconscious perceives me in my dream world have completely changed. I used to have no control over what occurred in my dreams, and as a result, I would often act in ways that I later regretted and wake up in a panic. These days, my dreams are incredibly vivid and I usually wake up from them. In no way does fear factor into my life. My mother and I have severed the toxic bond that I never thought I would be able to break free of. She certainly doesn't resemble my mother. Alex's mother, she was. It doesn't feel right to call myself Alex. Alex is similar to a twin that I had all my life but lost. I experience both everything and nothing at once. My capacity for self-defense is stronger than ever, but so is my empathy for people. Places with lots of people, loud noises, or bright lights make me feel overstimulated. I spend most of my time at home. I have stopped using social media completely, and I do not own a cell phone. I enjoy watching people's reactions when you say that. I feel completely out of it when I can't connect with anyone, anywhere, at any time. The paradox is that I can. I've always wanted to draw but have never been able to throughout my life. Unexpectedly, I can now draw. Faces, specifics, and shadowing. I have better coordination than ever before. My current poems are completely different in style from all of my earlier ones. I don't even have a hankering for drugs, and I actually object to taking even an ibuprofen. Since Earth time doesn't seem to be accurate, I rarely use a clock. I now base my life on nature. I really don't want to drive a car and I don't. My thoughts are vague and abstract, and I'm becoming more and more curious every day. I go through phases where I cry. Not out of sadness or another sentimental reason. I simply have to cry because my tears are like a language unto themselves. I try to describe who I am now to my boyfriend, but I can't find the right words to do it justice. Between our flimsy, weak, fleshy bodies and the rules that govern this realm, there are a lot of restrictions on the physical plane of existence. Everything has its own life within it, even as I sit here on my couch in what appears to be silence. All of the room's angels, as well as various materials and textures, can be felt dancing to their individual frequencies. As I attempt to make sense of all these brand new events, I constantly feel as though I'm on a psychedelic trip. Is it possible to feel so completely different from oneself that you lament losing that identity? Like a past life, Alex. I'm still a baby, only 5 months old, and I have a lot to learn. Even though I occasionally miss her essence, I'm a much more pure and refined version of myself than I ever was. I can't relate to Alex unless I recall being a young child, less than 7 years old. Although there is an adult supervisor in charge, I still feel like a child. I want to learn more about myself right now. For once in my life, it's a pleasure to be alive. The present.